All right, so we are now coming to a new topic, which is on the Malaysian society, or it is titled over here as Multicultural Society and Unity. Why the title is like this? This is basically the standard or official title that we have given the syllabus by the Ministry of Higher Education over here in Malaysia. All right, as I've mentioned before, I'm sure I did at some point during the um first class that we had, the MPU subjects, as you can see over here, the subject code for this subject is MPU 3173. The MPU subjects, especially the U1 category subjects. How do you know this is a U1 category subject? You look at the second digit in the subject code 3173. So one over there is MPU U1 category. So all MPU U1 category subjects, the syllabus are the same all over Malaysia. So regardless of whether you study over here in KDU or in Taylor's or in public universities, yeah, you will take the same subject, same syllabus given by the Ministry of Higher Education. Right, so we follow the nomenclature, the title that they use for topics also. Um, Personally, I find this topic, the title, it is titled in a way that is a bit, not to say weird, but um, a bit. I don't feel it to be capturing the G's of the discussion. But yes, I think we'll try to as best as we can to cover the information based on the learning outcome and objectives that we have, right? So basically, the title over here already revealed to you that we are trying to look into the composition of the Malaysian society, which is multicultural, and how, despite the differences and diversity that we have in our society, how is it that we can still foster national unity? Okay, now um, the point that at times over here in Malaysia we tend to be um, a bit unrealistic, I would say, if I may use the word. We like to use the word multicultural to define or to describe our society, and we think that our society is very unique. But as someone who has traveled quite a bit in some other parts of the world, I realize that almost all countries in the world are multicultural. The society are multicultural. It's just that sometimes we take it for granted because of the terms that we use to refer to them. For example, there are many of you over here who are from China. We people who are not from China, we label you all Chinese people. But within the Chinese society in the People's Republic of China, there are in fact multiple cultural ethnic groups, which we tend to not acknowledge in terms of how we see or perceive the Chinese society. Likewise, when it comes to the Indian society also, in India, there is no such thing perhaps to say a specific Indian society, because within the Republic of India, there are multiple societies also, multiple languages as well. Right, so that is something that I do acknowledge. So at times, I explain about the Malaysian society. I also feel a certain amount of humility, in a sense that we are not that unique, but we are unique maybe in our certain ways when it comes to our recent history, and how a certain aspect of our law and policy has been enforced throughout the years when it comes to preserving the diversity that we have within our society. Okay, so sorry for the long introduction. Now, so these are the learning outcomes for today: to explain the history of Malaysia's multicultural society and to analyze the challenges in building national integration and unity in a multicultural society. Now, this is what we'll be doing for today. Now, here's what we will do for today. Now, we will cover the Malaysian society, covering one society, one community after the other. In today's class, in this live WebEx class, I will cover only the Malay society. when it comes to the discussion or points with regards to the Chinese, Indian, and other minority groups over here in Malaysia, I will forward to you. In fact, I've already uploaded the recording. There are 2 recordings on this on open learning. So that will be something that you can listen to at any point after this class, between today after this class until on Friday, and then on Friday I will be giving a tutorial for you to do. So just to give you a heads up, so on Friday, this Friday, there won't be a live face-to-face class. Even though if you were to follow our timetable, we are supposed to have live class, but my apologies, I cannot come for this Friday's class. I am hosting a seminar online, which I will be giving a speech and also a presentation. So because of that, I will not be able to conduct the class. So you will listen to the recorded lectures and also answer 1 tutorial question after that. Okay, I'll repeat that again later on at the end of the class. All right, so what we'll do after we have covered the Malay society is to cover what is referred to as our national ideology. Right, so that will be a different slide. Also, the slide you can, those of you who can access your open learning now, you can click on the topic multicultural society, and you will find 2 slides over there. One slide is this one on the society or communities over here in Malaysia, and the other slide is about the national ideology. So we'll cover the Malay society from this slide, and then we'll move after that to the next slide on national ideology after this. Okay. All right. So the Malaysian society, like I said, is multicultural. Yes, so these are some of the major ones. Ethnic communities that we have over here in Malaysia. Malays are the majority society over here in Malaysia, but not a very big majority. I am a Malay Muslim, so we are about 64%, or maybe it's a growing majority, but probably now reaching around 65% of the total population. But we have a very sizable minority group, especially the Chinese and the Indians. And again, over here, we are using the word in general, Chinese and Indians, even though within the Chinese society and within the Indian society, there are in fact multiple groups also, which you will come to more of these points in this slide. And also, I've explained this in the recorded lecture that you can access later on. Now, the other communities that are mentioned over here, Iban and Dayak, these are the main communities or ethnic groups that we have in the state of Sarawak. Right. So again, remember, Sarawak is in East Malaysia. Right. We are in Peninsular Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Shah Alam, where KDU is located. We are in Peninsular Malaysia on one side, and then on the other side, separated by the South China Sea, is the Borneo Island. The northern part of Borneo Island belongs to Malaysia. So Sarawak is the biggest state in Malaysia overall, and it's the bigger half of the Malaysian territory in the east, and the major ethnic group over there are the Iban and Dayak community. In Sabah, right, or North Borneo in specifically, right, the name that was used before, the main community are the Kadazan Dusun and also the Bidayo. So the Kadazan and Iban, these are the majority groups in Sabah and Sarawak. And as I know I've mentioned this before, in Sabah and Sarawak, both the Iban and Kadazan, the majority of them are not Muslims, they are Christians. Right? So Malays over here in Malaysia, they are Muslims. So the Malay Muslim population over here remains the majority because of the sheer majority that we have in terms of number of people or the proportion in the population in Peninsular Malaysia. There are Malay people in Sabah and Sarawak as well, but in Sabah and Sarawak, they are the minority. Okay, so that's something for you to perhaps note down. Okay. The orang asli, right? So yeah, sorry, this came out a bit late. Now, the orang asli refers to the aborigines. You know what aborigines are? Right, if I may just type the word over here, aborigines. Right, so origins refer to the I some books use the word primitive society. I find that to be rather offensive because when you say primitive, it seems that they are so backwards in terms of their ways of doing things, and primitive also can be associated with certain rather aggressive barbaric practices, which is not the case over here in Malaysia. The Aborigines, they are very much integrated within the society. Only a very small minority within them remains 100% still traditional in terms of their lifestyle. Yeah, like the native Australians, true, right? So the Aborigines are like the native Australians. In fact, uh, interesting that you brought this up, Yasmin. If you were to study deeply also into anthropology, right? Especially when it comes to the history of the human population over here, the Orang Asli or the Aborigine community over here in Malaysia, as far as DNA analysis, human genome project analysis results have indicated, the Orang Asli community over here in Malaysia have similarity in terms of their genetic makeup compared to the native Australian community in Australia, right? So that, yeah, maybe we'll come to that point a bit after this. So this is a question that I often ask. Now, I don't normally like to talk too much about the Malaysian society in this class, Malaysian studies, because I know it's a topic that you study also, or you cover also in the other MPU subject, Life in Malaysia. And those of you who came through our diploma system or diploma program here at KDU, you had taken a subject called Malaysia culture and life, which you have covered also about the Malaysian society. So because of that, I try to cover something a bit different rather than just the basic information. So as a result of that, I like to ask this question: who came here first? Anyone would like to propose an answer? So I just mentioned to you just now, right? Who are the communities or ethnic groups that we have over here in Malaysia? Can any of the groups lay claim that we came here first? Anyone? No? Anyone?
The Ibans.
The Ibans, right? The Ibans, probably if you look into the earliest community that they have, they probably share the same ancestry with the Orang Asli or the Aborigines. So maybe that's true, right? Or is it the Aborigines? Yeah, yeah. So I think that's the easy answer. Definitely the Aborigines. No, what is this? Apologies. What happened? Oh, I think I clicked on the link. All right. Or is it the Malays? Now, I think as the Malay person myself, that answer would probably make my family very happy, or my people very happy. But honestly speaking, I don't think that's the case, because the Malay people also, we are, historically speaking, we are a hybrid community. We are basically the result of of intermarriages between or amongst the various communities that we have around the region, and that results into the Malay community that we have today. Now, the Aborigine community obviously would have the strongest claim. And when you say when we refer to the Aborigine community, and as one of you mentioned just now, the Iban, the Dayaks, and the Kadazan, uh, because of their because of their clear uh, historical what's the word to be used over here? They have a lot of historical evidence to show that they are also part of the Aborigine community in the past. So because of that, we can also maybe lump them together in this particular case. If you were to answer the question, who came here first, the Aborigines? Maybe you want to ask even the other question. So the Aborigines, they came from where? Right. So any one of you who may have studied anthropology or human geography at some point previously, you perhaps came across this theory that we have about the earliest human communities. There are three of them. One is the Caucasoid. So Caucasoid refers to Caucasians, right? White-skinned people or human beings. And then the Negroid. So the word Negro over here refers to dark-skinned human persons, and then the other one, the final one, is Mongoloid. Now, the word Mongoloid would remind you of what, the country or the area, the region that we know now as Mongolia. So basically, the basic features of the Mongolian people, they are not very, not they are not necessarily very white or fair in terms of their complexion, but they are fairer compared to the Negroid. They have smaller eyes, right, compared to the others. So you can say the Mongoloid in this particular theory refers to the early ancestors of the Chinese people, Korean people, Japanese people, and probably also the Malaysian or the Malay people over here in this region. So if you want to follow that particular theory, then that's true. So that's basically the theory uh, that that we have. I deleted the slide that I used to have for some reason because I just wanted to cut this short, I guess. Now there is the two theories that we have on this part on earliest on the earliest human migration is that uh, the first theory is called out of Taiwan theory. Now, not sure whether anyone of you have heard this before. Now, why Taiwan? Because as I mentioned to you just now, the earliest human community in this region were the Mongoloids. So the Mongoloids came from the upper part of the mainland Chinese territory today, and then according to some studies in archaeology and anthropology, they found that the earliest Mongoloid community actually came from Taiwan. So from Taiwan, they migrated down south to the areas that we know today as mainland China, right? Inland, further inland in mainland China, and then to the islands of Japan, the Korean Peninsula, and then to the Philippines, and then finally to the Malay Archipelago, the areas of Malaysia and Indonesia today. So in this particular theory, it seems to indicate, or it seems to propose, that all of us over here in this part of the world, our ancestors were in fact like the earliest Chinese community. So they came down south, right, at different point throughout history before eventually establishing human settlements over here. But that theory is although it's something which is quite well known and well acknowledged by many um, uh, historians, especially when it comes to human migration or human geography. Over here in Malaysia has been not to say debunked, but has been heavily criticized because we like to believe more in this theory. This is okay. Sorry, this is out of Taiwan. Yes, this is out of Taiwan. So coming from the area of Taiwan over here and then traveling down south. Right. Sorry about the confusion. I thought I deleted this. Right. Now the theory that is now being that it has become a bit more popular in this region is the theory called the Sundaland theory. Now, why is this theory popular? Let me explain to you and see whether you get it or not. Now, the other theory just now out of Taiwan mentions that the Malay people, if I may say so, the native the majority community over here in Malaysia, our ancestors were people from mainland China or from Mongolia, Mongoloid, so they traveled down south. Now, in this theory, the argument is the other way around. Now, because we are at the center of the Earth, the equator, so according to this theory, it says that even earlier than the Mongolites, or even earlier than the African communities and the Caucasoid communities also in other parts of the world, the first establishment of the first establishment of human settlement was in fact in this part of the world called Sundaland. However, Sundaland, as we know today, as what is referred to over here, is not the same as what we know as the Malay archipelago today. The theory says it's something like this. 10,000 to 30,000 years ago, this entire area, Peninsular Malaya, Sabah and Sarawak, Sumatra, which is all of this part of Indonesia over here, right? They were actually connected in one big land, right? And because it was a land which is in the equator, the weather was very favorable, very fertile, and everything. But at some point, because of the rise of level of water in the ocean, right? uh, global warming, you would say, at some point, extreme global warming resulted into the rise of water level in the oceans. As a result of that, some of the areas, a lot of the areas, in fact, that used to be connected were submerged by water. Right, so that's how we end up with the land that we know today as Peninsular Malaysia and Borneo Island, Sumatra, and so on. Where in fact everything used to be connected. So according to this Sundaland theory, right, the earliest human community, even earlier than anyone else, were in fact over here. And later on, because of this, you can say when this happened, it was a catastrophe. It was a, it was a natural disaster. So people had to flee from their living from their communities and seek other areas for them to settle down. So according to this theory, right, when those areas drowned, what happened was the people of Sundaland, they travel in different parts of the world to establish the areas that we know today as the communities that we know today as the Chinese people in mainland China, and also in the Middle East, and also in Australia, and also according to this theory, right, the Native Americans also, or the word that we sometimes use, which is not so nice, the Indians, right, they also, right, their ancestors also came from this region. Now, having explained that just now, why do you think this theory now has become more popular over here in Malaysia compared to the first theory just now out of Taiwan? Sorry, I'm having a bit of a sore throat, so I need to drink a bit more often. Anyone, why do you think this theory is actually now more popular among scholars in this part of the world, and that includes Malaysia and Indonesia, compared to the other theories now out of Taiwan? All right, just to cut the story short, probably this is something that bores the majority of you. The first theory just now mentions that the Malay people over here, or the people of this region as a whole, I would refer to overall the people, the native people in Malaysia and Indonesia today. The first theory just now out of Taiwan says that our ancestors came from mainland China, Mongoloids, right? So from the area, northern part of mainland China today. And then they traveled south and they established the communities that we know today. And we eventually became the Malay people, Javanese people, and so on. Now, the second theory argues that we are not, our ancestors are not Chinese, are not Mongoloid people. We are our own ancestors, right? So, in fact, the Chinese people, the Indian people, the Australian people, the Native Americans, they all actually came from us. So, when you have this theory being banded, being propagated, it gives you rather this psychological sense of superiority, isn't it? That all of you are in fact you are one of us, right? Our ancestors are the ones who established your community eventually. So that kind of psychological or uh, you know pride that came from this theory amongst the people of this part of the world has been quite pervasive among scholars, which I find to be rather, not to say childish, but I find it to be rather um, unnecessary. Because if you come back to the question I asked just now, who came over here? My answer to that at times is, who cares? Okay. Is that really that important for you to know who came here first? Or in your countries, right? Is it really important for you to know who came to your island or to your countries? Who was the first community over there? Is that really important? Not really, isn't it? Especially when it comes to you're trying to manage and govern the country now, right? And so I am interested to read about this because I have a keen interest in history. and many other things. So I read about these things out of academic interest, but I do not see this as anything valuable for us to use as a political propaganda or ideological propaganda in whatever way to instill or to reinforce a sense of patriotism or superiority in terms of your ancestry and and lineage. That I find to be, you know, to a certain extent really disturbing, because uh, if I may refer to a basic principle that we have in Islam, one of the nice, very nice, beautiful message that was given by the Prophet, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, during the last khutbah, the last sermon that he gave, was to really emphasize on the point that there is no Arab that is better than a non-Arab, and so on, white person, black person, and so on. Nothing. No, there's no superiority in terms of race, skin color, ethnic origins, and so on. It is based on your level of, in Islam we call the word taqwa, right? So in terms of your level of piety or devotion to the religion. So I think it's that ought to be the way that we look forward when it comes to how we manage any of our society. We look into uh, the sense of devotion, characteristic, right, in terms of dedication, rather than looking into skin color, ethnicity, and so on. But yeah, uh, that's me saying as someone sharing to you my personal thoughts. But one has to understand, and I understand this very, very, very well, that identity politics in Malaysia and in many other parts of the world is something very powerful and very crucial to understand. Right? So if you don't understand that, then it's difficult for you to really maneuver and make sense of the things that are happening in the world. So likewise over here in Malaysia, and the reason why we are covering this topic according to the syllabus that we have from the Ministry of Education. However, I would like to all of you to keep an open mind. Even though I may subconsciously during my when I say about the Malay society, I tend to emphasize on certain the beauty of it, the positive aspect of it. I don't mean in any way that it is superior compared to other cultures and any other practices. Right? So that is something that I do feel very strongly about. We ought to have a sense of respect towards each other, regardless of our ethnic cultural backgrounds. Okay, right. But this is something that any one of you, if you're interested to read more, I don't imagine that there are many of you who would be interested. But this is a fascinating book written by a Oxford. Uh, I believe he's not actually an anthropologist, nor is he a historian. Stephen Oppenheimer, I think he is in fact someone who's a biologist, but he studied biology in connection with the human DNA, tracing the similarities of different communities all over the world. And he actually is a major proponent uh, of the Sundaland theory that argues that this particular Eden in the east, the Sundaland area, was in fact the first major human settlement in the history of mankind. Right? Whether it's true or not, that's something else. Those of you students from Indonesia, you can even Google. There are some scholars in Indonesia who argues that the lost city of Atlantis, in fact, is not somewhere in Greece or in the Mediterranean. They argue that the lost city of Atlantis is in fact somewhere near Java Island. And this is something that connects to the Sundaland theory, right, propagated by Stephen Oppenheimer. Right? This is to me interesting stuff, but again, like I said, I don't imagine this is something that many of you would be interested to learn. But if you do, I'm more than happy to discuss this more with you at any point later on. Now, very cute. I just would like to cover some very quick points about the Malay community. As I said, this is something that you would study also in Life in Malaysia, the other MPU subject, and also in Malaysia Culture and Life in the diploma subject that some of you I'm sure had taken before. Now, the Malay community are considered in the modern perspective the native of Malaysia. Now, how is it then when I say that the Aborigines were here probably longer and the Karasan Dusun also? Why is it that the Malays are considered to be the natives? Now, here's where we come to a debate that you have in human geography in general. It's not really that weird for you to argue that the Malays are the natives in this land, because we are looking at this from the modern civilizational perspective. Maybe the word modern also over here is not very cannot be used. It's not used in a proper way over here. It's more like from a civilizational point of view. The argument is similar like this. If you look into, for example, the history of the human settlement in the English islands, right? In the English islands, right? So, in the history of Britannia, right, the whole area over there before, the English people that we know today are not necessarily also the aborigines or the earliest human communities over there, right? The earliest people over there were probably people who are primitive societies who are not necessarily very systematic in terms of their way of living. So it was later on when uh, uh, the earliest Caucasian communities from the Nordic area in Scandinavia, the Vikings and so on, right, came and traveled down south, and they established the communities that we have in England today, and they became the modern or the civilizational natives of the area, and they now claim to be the majority over there. Uh, so the Malays are like that as well. So yes, you can refer to the Aborigines, the Orang Asli, as the earliest community over here. But as far as development of this area as a civilization, right? So that is something that you would attribute to the Malay people. So that's why the Malay people lay claim to the argument that we are the Bumiputra, the prince of the soil over here, the natives over here, and as a result of that, we deserve some level of recognition in terms of special rights, privileges, and so on. Of course, it's an argument that can be carried further, as we had argued before, in terms of the what we have the provisions in our constitution, whether it's fair or not. That's a debate that you can have in different angles, right? Whether in the context of culture and history over here, or in the context of law and legality. But yeah, it's not something for us to go too deep into that. But like I said, if any one of you would like to have that debate and discussion privately with me, I'm more than happy to do that. All right, so the Malay people in general, we came from the various islands in the Malay archipelago. The Malay archipelago refers to the area that now covers the countries that we know as Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and to a certain extent Thailand as well, southern Thailand especially. Like myself also, if you were to ask me about my ancestors, as far as I know, on my father's side, my grandfather, my paternal grandfather says that they came from Malacca. They were one of those diaspora Malay communities who had to evacuate Malacca when Malacca was conquered by the Portuguese. But on my maternal my my maternal no so my paternal grandmother claims that they are I know for sure they have their ancestries or their lineage amongst the Javanese people, Javanese people in Java Island in Indonesia. On my mother's side, it's even more colorful. My maternal grandmother has her roots in Thailand amongst the Siamese people, and then the on my paternal grandfather, we know for sure my great great grandfather came from Aceh, Sumatra. So Aceh is an area in the northern part of Indonesia today. So a lot of Malay people like me today have similar uh, colorful branches of lineage that we can trace in our ancestry. So it's something that is pretty common for all of us, because in the past, this is something I mentioned before, the traveling or movements around amongst the people in this region were very was very easy, right? So you can be someone who was born in Sumatra, but if you want to travel at some point to Peninsular Malaysia or to Sabah and Sarawak today, you can, because there was no such thing as applying for a visa, having an international passport, no such thing. So things were easy. Feel that I'm things are a bit difficult now in our current village over here in Sumatra, in Palembang, for example. Let's go somewhere else. So they take the boat and then go travel across the Straits of Malacca and go to Selangor or to Malacca and establish a new family or a new settlement over there. So if you're not happy with that, you go somewhere else, to a different state. So things were very easy. Mobility was very easy at that particular point. So that's why it's pretty common for a Malay person like myself to have these different branches in terms of where our ancestors came from. Different roots or branches or where our ancestors came from. All right, so this is the entirety, the Malay archipelago. Sorry, sometimes I don't remember what comes next. All right, so this entire area is what we call Malay archipelago. So Malaysia, the territories that are now part of Malaysia, is only a small part of the entire Malay archipelago region, right? The majority of the islands in the Malay archipelago belongs to the Republic of Indonesia today. How many islands do you have in Indonesia? Students from Indonesia, you know or not? Is it 100,000 islands that you have in the Republic of Indonesia? So it's a massive country. As far as length, right? In terms of size, of course, there are many countries in the world that are bigger compared to Indonesia in terms of land size, but in terms of length, right, longitude, right, Indonesia is arguably the longest country in the world because it stretches from the tip of Sumatra over here, which is Aceh, and up until right, one half of the Guinea Island or New Guinea Island, and this is Irian Jaya. Right? So it's if someone wants to do an adventure, challenge yourself when it comes to traveling. That's a challenge. Travel from one end of Indonesia to the other end of Indonesia. That is something else. That is quite something. I only know one person, a political scientist and scholar, activist in Singapore, Professor Farish Noor, to be the only person who that I know personally have actually traveled uh, the whole distance over here. Yes, right. Go ahead. All right. So, what is the word now? The Malay people, the word that is used for to describe the Malay people, or the word Malay in the Malay language is Melayu. So that's why those of you who are taking the subject called BMK2, the subject is called Bahasa Melayu, Komunikasi Melayu is the word for Malay. Now, what is the origin of the word Melayu? So these are some of the hypotheses that we have. So when I use the word hypothesis, it means these are the theories or the assumptions. I would say not theories as such. They are the assumptions that we have about the origin of the word Melayu. Some of these are rather far-fetched, especially this one. The word Melayu comes from the French English word malice. It's a bit of a stretch over there to propose something like that. But the word layu, yes, if you were to take out the prefix over here, me, becomes layu. Layu is not a very positive word. It means that it's something that is wilting. You know, a tree when it's about to die, it's wilting, right? Fading, right? Faded or wilting. So that particular part of the word doesn't sound very nice, isn't it? I think the other two hypotheses or assumptions over here actually makes more sense. The first one over here is from the Javanese word Malay. Is it Malayu? I think, right? But it means in Javanese language, it means to run or to migrate or to retreat. So why is it that the Malay people are described probably as people who retreat and migrate a lot? Simply because that's what we used to do in the past. We migrate a lot from one place or the other. Right? A traditional way of living in this part of the world in the past, which is still practiced by some of the Aboriginal communities still, both in Malaysia and Indonesia, is slash and burn. Now what that means is they actually go from one jungle area to the other, they slash and clear it, and then they stay over there for 1 year. So one cycle of harvest, and then they move on to another land, and then they slash and burn that land again, and then they go over there. Why? Because the belief amongst the some of the people over here then, and to a certain extent even until now, among some of them, is that you cannot harvest to protect the fertility of the land. You cannot harvest on the same land continuously or back to back. So you have to actually use up or utilize one plot of land for planting crops, growing crops, and then harvest the crops. And then after that, you need to move on to another land. Obviously, this is not something which is environmentally positive because you slash and burn means you have to destroy, you have to clear out uh, green areas, right, from one place after the other. So it's not something which is allowed anymore, right? I think I'm not sure about in Indonesia, but in Malaysia, slash and burn is no longer something which is legal. You can do maybe within your own plot of land, which is bigger. You cover one small one parcel for 1 year, another parcel in another year. It's okay, but you are not free to explore, slash and burn, right? A larger area than what you are allowed to do. Okay, so that is for obviously for environmental protection reasons. Now, the other theory over here I think is also nice, which I think reflects another example of a hypothesis of the early or the origin of the Malay community over here. Right, Malayu comes from the Tamil word or the Sanskrit word that means mountains. Right, for example, the Mount Everest, right, in the Indian subcontinent, right, belongs to the mountainous region called the Himalayas. So Malay over there refers to mountains. So one theory about the origin of the Malay community says the Malays are in fact our ancestors were Indians who came from the mountainous regions in the Indian subcontinent. They travel. Eventually, they established their own. They expanded their communities and settlements in this part of the world. Probably that's true, especially when it comes to looking into the history of the monarchies over here in Malaysia. I would say personally that I do I believe more I believe or I'm quite convinced with the argument that the origin of the Malay monarchies or rulers that we have over here in Malaysia and also those that we had before previously in Indonesia, they were basically the noble people from the Himalayas, from the Indian subcontinent. So they came over here because they were more developed as a civilization. So they came over here, they became or they installed themselves as the leader of the community. So that started the kingship monarchy system that we have in this here in Malaysia, Indonesia, uh, and the lineage of them can be traced back to the various noble or royal families that we have in India or in the Indian subcontinent previously. Okay. All right. Now I've shown this diagram before to show how we have been divided as nation states today, modern nation states, because of the 1824 British Dutch Treaty, which divided the territories over here in this region in the Malay archipelago. Uh, some are given to the British, some are to the Dutch, and then also the areas that we have in Philippines today were left for the Spanish and eventually the Americans. Right, so that is basically the reason also why we have uh, our countries today. But not until the end of World War II, we had more strict rules when it comes to internet, when it comes to cross-border traveling or migration within the region, and also the use of passport and visas. Uh, Prior to World War II, things were still very easy. If you are from any of the areas in the Dutch Indies or Indonesia today, if you want to travel and move to the area in British Malaya, you can. Right? There weren't really any strict restrictions about having a proper visa, special clearance, or anything like that. So because of that things, that's why there are many Malays over here in Malaysia. We can trace our ancestry to the various communities in the throughout the region in the Malay archipelago. Right, so this is Malay population that has Indonesian origin. Indonesian over here, of course, I'm using the word Indonesia in the context of modern nation state, the name of the modern nation state Indonesia, but in the past it was referred to as the Dutch East Indies, right? Dutch East. Right, so Javanese, right? So these are some information that you can read about. The Javanese people, they came here and they are concentrated in this region, so in this area. This is just for your information. Don't worry about trying to memorize any of this. The Banjar people, they came from Banjarmasin, Kalimantan. Kalimantan is in fact in Borneo Island, which is the island where Sabah and Sarawak belongs to. Right? If you can recall back, right, Sabah and Sarawak is in the northern part or the top part of Borneo Island. The lower part of the Borneo Island is the area called Kalimantan, which belongs to the Republic of Indonesia. So the Banjar people can be found in the areas as stated over here, in the river valleys in Perak, in Selangor. And then you have the Bugis community. The Bugis community came from Sulawesi Island. The Minangkabau people from West Sumatra. Right. I can't show the slide side by side, but if I may refer to this, right, so by annotation over here, um, Javanese people, Java Island, where's Java Island? Java Island is over here. Um, and then just now the Banjar people came from Kalimantan. Where is Kalimantan? Kalimantan is basically over here. The Bugis people just now came from Sulawesi. Where is Sulawesi? Sulawesi is basically this island. Okay. I mentioned to you just now, my maternal great grandfather came from Aceh, Indonesia, or in Indonesia today. Where is Aceh? Aceh is over here, the northern part of Sumatra. Okay, many Malay people can probably there are probably more Malay people who can trace their ancestry to this particular part of Sumatra, which is called Palembang, right? But not necessarily all. I would say maybe a lot. I can't say also the majority because now we have intermarried. But as you can imagine, you can relate to your own cultural history as well. People in the past, right? Like, say for example, as recent as 100 years ago, there were hardly any intermarriages between different communities. What I mean by that is, if you are from Sulawesi, you are Bugis, right? You are more likely to marry someone who is from the Bugis community also. So likewise, if you are Javanese, you marry a Javanese person as well. So it was only like maybe around the start of the 20th century where intermarriages began to be a bit more common. Why? Because people had traveled a lot, right? So like I said, my ancestor from Aceh over here, they travel to Peninsula Malaya in Perak. My ancestor from Java also traveled from here to Johor. Okay, and probably I have ancestors from here as well, from Palembang, right? Travel over here. So we are like that, right? So our ancestries, the Malay people, are basically like that. The Bugis community has a very unique history in the sense that two of the Malay monarchies over here in Malaysia, here one is in Selangor, right? Selangor over here, where KDU is located, and Johor, just north of Singapore. The monarchies over here can be traced back to the not moving to the people of Sulawesi, which is the Bugis community. Right. So you can see how things are very colorful on that particular part, how we are the result of the various uh, the many generations of traveling across the region, intermarriages, and so on. Okay, I'm sure all of you also, especially those of you who are from China or from the Indian subcontinent, even from the Middle East, you can trace your ancestry also from various branches, various areas in the region. Right, so I think we are similar in that particular way. The Minangkabau is West Sumatra. So we've come across this point before about what is a Malay person, so I won't want to uh, dwell too much into this. A Malay person, according to the Malaysian constitution, is a Muslim who habitually speaks Malay and also follow the Malay customs. Right? But of course, stating this in a very general sense, no one really will come and knock on your door and check, are you speaking Malay in this house or not? Right? Do you follow the Malay custom? Do you eat rice? three times a day? Do you eat rice with fork and spoon, or is it with your hands? Right, so nobody is going to come and check on that because that would be rather absurd. But then, yes, right, generally speaking, this is how we define a Malay person. And why is it important to have a clear definition of a Malay person in the Malaysian constitution? Because of the privileges and special status that we accord to the Malay community in our constitution. So it needs to be defined then. If you are saying that this Malay people requires or can should be recognized for certain things and given certain privileges and special rights for certain things, you need to define then who they are, so that only those who are within that boundary of definition and characteristics, only those are the ones that can receive these or enjoy these privileges that we have as stated in the Constitution of Malaysia. Okay, so these are the points again that we have come across previously, just for your information. Um, right. Why do I mention this? Right, because this is again a slide that you have seen before, but this is looking into the history of the Malay community as far as being Muslims concerned. So prior, so the Malay people over here in this part of the world, or generally the majority of the people in the Malay archipelago, they became Muslims during the time of the Malaccan Empire, during the golden age of the Malaccan Empire. Why? Because the Sultan of Malacca, there is a debate whether it's the first or second Sultan of Malacca converted to Islam. But once the Sultan converted to Islam, all the people who were under his territories, vast territories, they also converted to Islam in March. And again, that's something which is not something unique necessarily, because when you look into the history of Christianity in Western Europe or in Europe in general, right, why, how is it that the people in Europe, majority of them became Christians? It was because at some point, uh, the Emperor of Rome, right, uh, the ruler of the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, and as a result, that everyone follows. Yes, I mean the history of Christianity in Europe or Western Europe and Eastern Europe can be very has a lot of details to it. I won't come into that. Some of you perhaps know more than me in terms of the origin of the differentiation between the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, and then later on the Protestant Church. And within the Protestant Church also there are many branches and so on. So that's something else, right? So over here in Malaysia, for some reason, uh, uh, this is something that remains a very interesting debate that we have. All the people over here in this part of the world and in the Malay archipelago who converted to Islam, and the majority of them are, so the Muslims over here in this entire region, if you were to combine both with Indonesia, probably is around 70%, because in Indonesia, about 80 or 85% of the population are Muslims. Malaysia is about 60, 65%. So overall, maybe around 70, 75. Now, all of these Muslims in this part of the world, in the Malay archipelago, they follow one mazhab or one particular school of thought, which is the Shafi'i mazhab. Uh, Muslim students over here would know what I mean by that. For the others, this is just for your information. So Muslims over here in this part of the world, we are more or less observing or adhering to the same religious tradition as far as rituals are concerned, in terms of the way that we pray and many other aspects of ibadah, or many aspects of practice, religious practices that rituals that we perform. Right, so that's something that is quite unique in the sense that when you go to some other parts of the world, right, there is more variety. Uh, Perhaps, yeah. Again, maybe I'm overstating this, because I do know in the both in the Indian subcontinent and in the Chinese mainland, the Muslim communities over there, they follow one mazhab also, one particular school of thought, which is Hanafi. But yeah, in this part of the world, it's all Shafi'i. Why? Because you can trace back to the history of the origin of the Muslim community over here, which is a topic that we'll cover at the end of the semester. But sufficient for us to know now that uh, why the Malay people over here until today they remain Muslims. That particular uh, the reason for that can be traced back to what happened during the Malaccan Empire when the Sultan of Malacca converted to Islam, Right? All his subjects also converted to Islam. Okay. These are the religions in Malaysia. Probably 60% is a conservative number, could be a bit more than that because the Malay Muslim community over here in Malaysia is a growing community. The Chinese community in Malaysia is a shrinking population, right? So that will be a point that you can listen to. I've discussed this in the recorded lecture, which you can listen to after this, right? And please pay attention to that particular point for the purpose of your tutorial later on. Okay. These are the economic activities of the Malay people before the colonial period. Basically, traditional economic activities: fishing, plantations, boat construction. Boat construction is something interesting. It's a dying art that we have in this part of the world. The Malay people, also Indonesian people as well, because we are traditionally seafarers, so we travel from different areas within the Malay archipelago. So that requires us to be good when it comes to constructing strong, reliable boats. So that became an art by itself, an industry by itself, right? In throughout the years in history. It's just that now, because of the advancement of air traveling, and so on, so people don't travel by boats so much anymore. So as a result, that boat constructors, right, people who are really skillful, right, in the art of boat construction, they are not that many left anymore. But it's good for me to note that the Ministry of Heritage and Culture over here in Malaysia has actually made some conscious effort trying to actually sponsor giving full scholarship to young adult students to study boat construction from the old masters that we have today. So the reason for doing this is to give them the extra incentive and motivation. You learn this, we pay for your education, but you learn from them, which means that you have to live together with them, and then you become like a young apprentice, basically following exactly what they do, how they do things. Because it's not just about constructing the boat, because boat construction over here, and I'm sure also in many parts of the world, involves also uh, uh, both the physical outlay but also the decorations, the interior designs, and so on. So that is something that needs to be preserved, which I think true if you were to just leave it behind and no one from the younger generation are willing or are asked to or um, encouraged to learn about this, and it would just simply die a natural death, because constructing a boat using modern technology is not difficult, right? It's just maybe you can assemble that in a factory. But this is about doing a boat which is preserving the culture or the culture, aesthetic and artistry that we have for generations in the past. For many generations since the past. So it's something that I think is worth preserving. Sailors, local merchants, herders, right, producing traditional products. So these are some of the things that the Malays were doing. So we will come to one discussion later on about discrimination and stereotypes about in relation to these activities, but sufficient for us to maybe mention that for the time being, and we'll come to that later on. Now, this is a point that probably is. I'll just bring it up for a while, for a moment, and we'll discuss this more when we come to the last chapter or the last topic in the semester, which is about Islam and the Constitution. The Malay people over here in Malaysia, were they more liberal and less religious and less Islamic in the past? Now, this is showing you a picture of a typical Malay adult in terms of how they used to, or we used to dress ourselves in public. So as you can see over here, in the past, there were not many. I'm old enough to remember when I was in school, there were hardly any students going to school wearing the hijab, wearing the headscarf. And among teachers also, among the Malay Muslim teachers, hardly anyone also wears the scarf as well. So it's just that you see this more in the last 10 or maybe 20 years. And that is actually the result of many different factors. It's not just because of some kind of uh, ideological propagation on the part of the government. No, it was something that comes as a result of geopolitics, right? Global issues or global religious issues that we have had in the past 30 years or so, right? Which I'll try to make that connection later on when we come to this topic. But sufficient for us to say, as far as the religious observance, how religious observant we are in terms of our practices, appearance, dress code, and so on, yes, the Muslim community over here in Malaysia have become much more religious compared to the past, right? Now more than 60%, probably even more now. Recent statistics could be the most recent statistics could be even more than 60%. Could easily be, I would say, could easily be more than 60% to say that Muslim parents now send their children to some formal Islamic primary school education. The typical way how it's done over here in Malaysia is that for a Malay student, Malay Muslim student, they will go to national school in the morning, and schools over here in Malaysia is only half a day in national school, so it's between 7:30 until 1 p.m. So after that, they go back home, and then after Zuhur or after the afternoon prayer time, around 2:30, you will start your religious education curriculum. So you will go to a different school, sekolah agama or Islamic Islamic education school, right? And that will go on from 2:30 p.m. until 5:30 p.m. Right? So the majority, a big majority of Muslim parents today, they do that. I did that also to my kids because that was the way it was done for everyone. So my kids also felt if they don't go, then they would feel left out. But my youngest daughter, um, the picture you see over here, in fact, this is my youngest daughter when she was younger. Now she's 11 years old. I did not actually ask her to go to the Islamic primary school education because I wanted to teach her on my own because I felt going to the school in the afternoon was rather tiring, and also because of the class size, and there are so many students in the classroom, about 40, sometimes 50 students. There were hardly any individual attention given to the students. So I felt I could do better. Of course, that is overestimating the time that I have, right, when it comes to teaching her myself. But I still try on my own to teach because as a Muslim parent, one of our primary obligation is to ensure our kids know about the religion in terms of at least the basic things, fardu ain, the prayers and reciting the Quran, right? So that is something that I know I can do that myself. I can teach my kids myself. It's just, of course, it's whether you have the time and energy to do that. Yeah, so it's a choice, but so it's not forced. So at least over here in Malaysia, it's not forced. Yeah, my daughter obviously she looks more Chinese compared to Malay. True or not? Right? Uh, as mentioned before, maybe to some of you, if not all of you, my wife was from China. She passed away already, but she was from China, from Lanzhou. So my youngest daughter, especially, she looks very much Chinese, probably because she was born in Lanzhou in China, but she's a Malaysian citizen. So this point we'll not cover now. We'll cover this later. I would like to move on now to a new to a different subtopic, which is about the national ideology, which is a short one. Right? Don't worry. Get out from this. You have a slide called Rukun Negara. This is a very quick one. We refer to. Thank you, Natasha. My wife passed away a long time already. Next year will be 10 years. Yeah, but true. I mean, I appreciate that. My kids are now grown up already. We My oldest one, they are twins. They are now 16. My youngest one, the sound that you saw the picture at that time, I think she was 5 or 6 years old. Now she's 11. Okay, I incidentally, how old do you think I am? Any one of you? Can you take a guess? 35. Wow, okay, that's nice. Okay, makes me feel young. 42, 42, 40. So yeah, I'm okay. I am 43. Okay, I just turned 43 last month. Uh, September. Sorry. Now it's November already. Right? So I turned 43 last September. Close, yes. uh, Now, the Rukun Negara is the word in Malay that means basically national ideology or national philosophy. Rukun, those of you who speak Arabic, comes from the word Rukun in Malay comes from the word that we have in Arabic, Arkan, right? Or principles or pillars. That's what we refer to, Arkan of Islam, the principles or pillars of Islam. So this is the principle of the country. What is the common philosophy, ideology, principle that we hold together despite we coming from different background, religion, ethnicity, culture, and so on. Right. So this is something that we thought the government thought was something important for us to have, right? In order for us to have a common sense of direction, vision, where we want to go as a nation. We can have our diversity and differences, yes, but we should have a common sense of direction in terms of how we see ourselves as a people, a group of people in one nation, one group of people from one nation, a citizen, a common citizen um, association that we ought to have, bonding that we ought to have. Right, showing you this picture in terms of looking into how the societies were in the past. The Malay community before used to live in villages like this. Right, this is a traditional boat, right, for fishing, for built by fishermen. And then the Chinese people, they used to uh, the majority of the Chinese people over here in Malaysia came during the time of the British colonial period. So they came, among others, to become tin miners. This is a typical tin mining site back in the 19th and early 20th century. So the British people brought in large number of Chinese laborers to work in these tin mining areas. The reason why they had to bring in Chinese workers and also Indian workers to work in rubber plantations as pictured over here. That is something that you can hear the discussion in my recorded lecture that you can listen to after this. Okay. Now, so because of that, we need to understand that over here in Malaysia, we want to break away from the divide and rule philosophy that allegedly the British have practiced in the past. Now, this divide and rule policy is often described like this: the British they want to remain in control of Malaya. They needed people to work in the different industries that they have. The Malays would focus more on traditional industries and also maybe to a certain extent administration. The Chinese will be working in as in tin mining areas and also to become the shopkeepers and the merchants, right? Especially when it comes to supplies or imports of importing items from from mainland China. The Indian people were brought in to work in the various plantation area, rubber, palm oil, and so on. So when you have these different communities in one area, in one territory, right? The British felt that the best way to preserve their own self-interest, their own domination in this area, is to ensure that they never get together. What I mean by that is we don't want the Malays, Chinese, and Indians to be united, to get together, and if they were to combine forces, they can overthrow the British. So as a result of that, according to this particular argument, the British allegedly purposely enforced this policy of dividing the Malays, Chinese, and Indians into different areas of settlement, so different areas, living areas, different villages, right? So that they don't interact or minimize at least the interaction amongst them, so that the British can remain in control, ruling British Malaya. Now, this is a very common argument that you have amongst many local historians over here in Malaysia, and I studied this a lot. Obviously, as part of the standard syllabus in in Malaysian history. Those of you who have taken other MPU subjects, Malaysia Culture and Life in Diploma or Life in Malaysia in study now, also probably you have heard your lecturers mention about this particular policy by the British as well. But here's where I perhaps would differ again. I'm a bit of an outcast when it comes to certain things about history in terms of my opinion. I don't quite believe that the British purposely was doing this grand strategy of dividing people and then doing this for the purpose of maintaining control, because I think it was just the practical thing to do, isn't it? You imagine the other opposite, the opposite of the other end of the spectrum, so to speak. If you were a British administrator, uh, how, why would you want to mix together everyone in the same living area? Say, for example, there is a Malay village already. You want to foster national unity or promote intercultural communication, right? Or in ethnic integration. So you purposely brought in some Chinese people from mainland China and Indian people from the Indian subcontinent. You put them live together for them to stay together side by side with the Malays in the Malay village. What do you think would happen if you were to do that? I think you would have trouble, right? Because remember, this is during the early years of the influx of the Chinese and Indians in this part of the world. So communication barrier definitely will be there. Cultural misunderstanding definitely would happen from time to time. Religious misunderstanding also, right, would be something that you can expect. So I don't think it is something practical for the British to do anything else other than putting people in different settlement areas, because that's just the practical thing to do. I don't know whether I'm making sense with this argument or not. Any one of you who disagree with me, if you have heard an argument to the contrary, you are more than welcome to share that here. But sufficient for me to continue over here to say that those differences are there. National unity is a problem, right? So whether or not the British voluntarily did the division is there, right? So it requires some effort in terms of trying to bring people together. So our first prime minister was someone who was good. He was trying to, as best as he can, to bring people together. But we had problems in the past or after the independence. So we had in our history, I mentioned there were a few scuffles or physical conflicts between the different racial groups. I'll just mention two main ones over here. One is in 1964 in Singapore. This is when Singapore was part of Malaysia. And then the other one is in, uh, yeah, as a result of that, or one of the reasons for that, and this is one of the main reasons that eventually resulted into Singapore being thrown out or was asked to leave or withdrew from Malaysia, depends on where you stand in this argument. But we had arguably a more serious incident of racial conflict over here on 13th of May 1969. This was mainly concentrated in Kuala Lumpur. Hundreds of people died, and this was after a general election that was held in 1969, and there were riots that happened in the streets of Kuala Lumpur. Over here, stated over here 39, but we know now based on more independent research on what happened during this time, the number of people who died was easily more than 200 on both. It was mainly it was mainly between the Malays and Chinese, right? So both sides suffered or had a lot of people who died. So this is a chronology about what happened since then. So the incident happened on 16 May 1969. As a result of that, the government declared a state of emergency. Parliament was suspended, so there were curfews and so on. On August 1969, or between August and December 1969, the government formed a new department specifically look into efforts and programs on how to foster national unity. So this is called the National Unity Department, uh, later on renamed to be a Ministry of National Unity, which still exists until today. And then another council was and then the council, and then the National Consultative Council was formed, and that council eventually gave the proposal that we ought to have our own national ideology called the Rukun Negara. Rukun is principles or pillars, Negara is country. So this is the pillars of the country, or we can loosely translate this from the meaning of it, or the spirit of it, and the meaning of it is referring to national ideology or national philosophy. So what is this national philosophy? So this national philosophy is called the Rukun Negara. It was officially declared on 31st August 1970. So take note of this, so just for your information, that we did not actually have a national ideology when we got independence in 1957. This was only declared in 1970 after the racial riots that we had on the streets of Kuala Lumpur on May 1969. Okay, so what is this Rukun Negara? There are 5 principles in the Rukun Negara. These are 5. Now take some time, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, to look at all these 5 principles. They are uh, they are placed according to an order. Pillar number 1, pillar number 2, until pillar number 5. Which one do you think is number 1? Which one is number 2, 3, 4, and 5? Which one do you think is number 1? You have, and it's not arranged according to the correct order. What is the correct order? What is number 1? Believe in God. Anything else? Yes, the answer is number 1 is believe in God. What do you think is number 2? You want to say something? Tal says loyalty to the king. Anyone else? Yes, the answer is loyalty to the king is number 2. So it's God and then king. All right. So after that is what? Which one do you think comes first, constitution or law? Constitution, right? Correct. So it's constitution. So Moyo says constitution. Yes, constitution comes first, right? So it's basically come back to number 1 is belief in God. Number 2 is loyalty to king and country. Number 3 is supremacy of constitution. Why constitution is above law? Because you need to have the constitution first before you can have the rule of law. Right? Understand again, the constitution refers to the supreme legal document for any country or any organization for that matter. So when you have the constitution being acknowledged as the supreme document for legal reference, then you can have law being enforced or the rule of law being enforced based on the constitution, right? So it's not king, constitution, law, and finally mutual respect and good social behavior, right? So this is what you have, the national philosophy, number 1 until 5, and this is what you have in the Malay language. Now, this particular Rukun Negara, or this 5 pillars national philosophy over here, is something that I would say the majority, maybe at least 80% or even more than 90%, uh, every single Malaysians over here, we remember this by heart. You know why or not? We remember this. Some of you, Hannah, I think you need to mute. Okay, I'll mute. All right, so why do you think that all of us over here in Malaysia, almost all of us over here in Malaysia, we memorize these five principles? The law in this country that you have to memorize this? No. But why is it that we memorize this? Anyone can take a guess. Try to maybe reflect back on your own country, right? Is there something special that you do uh, during your school days that makes you remember something by heart? You learn this in primary school. Yes, we learn about this, true, but it's not just about learning it. It's also about what? Religion? Yeah, religion. Not sure what do you mean by that. If you mean that we do this as part of our religious education, no. But it's basically this, right? Every Monday during the weekly assembly session in all schools over here in Malaysia, uh, both national and also private schools, you have to recite this in the during the assembly. So there will be a student leader who will recite this on the mic, and everyone else will follow. It will be something like, they say kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, right? So the rest will follow. Kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, right? Kesetiaan kepada raja dan negara. Kesetiaan kepada raja dan negara. Right? So this is something that we do once a week uh, during our school days, from primary school until secondary school. So that is easily, uh, that's about 11 years of your life. You will recite this every week. So that's why we remember this. If there is anyone who don't remember this, that's a bit odd. It's that student, that person either did not go to school, maybe homeschool, which is a possibility over here in Malaysia now, or maybe that person totally, did not pay attention throughout the 11 years every Monday during this particular ceremony. Right? uh, Now, is this something do you think necessary? Do you have something similar in your country in terms of recitation of anything about the country, pledging of oath or anything in your country? Do you have anything similar like that? Anyone? I only know that in mainland China, I think in China today, maybe no, that maybe students from China can share with us what you went through. But I remember my wife, my late wife, and also my father-in-law from China used to say that during the time of Mao Zedong, the supreme leader of the Chinese Communist Party in the past, uh, his way of governing was a bit different. It was very controlling. Right? So according to my father-in-law, in China back during the days of Mao Zedong, every day, in fact, before you start your work, you have to assemble in a common area, and there will be a huge photo or huge portrait of Mao Zedong, and everyone will be lining up like this, and you will bow down, right, before the portrait of Mao Zedong and ask for his blessing for you to begin your work for the day. Right? So probably I think that that kind of ceremony or that kind of things can only be found today in country in North Korea perhaps, but I don't think in China you have anything like that anymore. You sing the national anthem over here in Malaysia. Obviously, we sing the national anthem too during the assembly. The only country that I know that probably has something similar, and in fact, you can argue this is something that we copied from them, right? Is in fact in Indonesia. Indonesia actually have the five principles called the Pancasila, right? Since the birth of the country, the independent country in 1945, right? So so the Malaysian national principle, um, I have no qualms to acknowledge this. We in a way copy this, or we were inspired by the Pancasila principle of the Republic of Indonesia. But it's just that the five principles that you have in the Pancasila philosophy in Indonesia is not necessarily the same with what we have in Malaysia. But yes, religion is still number one, right? Uh, now, what a bit more interesting, what as an interesting comparison, perhaps you can see is this. You see the Panchasila when it refers to God over here, it refers to specifically belief in the one and only God. So that actually uh, uh, preconditions the people or the people of Indonesia to believe in monotheistic religion or monotheism. So monotheism basically refers to religions that believe in one God, and that includes Islam, obviously, and also Christianity. Now, yes, I do know, right? Some of you perhaps may think about Christianity. The main doctrine is the concept called Trinity, where you have God the Father, the Holy Ghost, and God the Son. But actually, underlying the Christian theology, and I think any students who are Christians over here can verify what I'm saying. Underlying the basic principle of Christian theology is that, or the concept of God in Christianity is to believe in one God. It's just that according to the Christian theology, the argument or the point of view is that God exists in three different forms or can operate or can communicate with you in three different ways. So as the Son, human flesh, as the Holy Ghost, spirit, spiritual communication, and then God the Father in terms of the overall uh, belief in terms of his omnipresence and so on. So it's still monotheism. But in Malaysia, if you refer back just now, right, the concept, the belief in God over here is something very general, believe in God, right? So it doesn't state over there believe in one God. So it's something interesting for us to observe in the sense that over here in Malaysia, it's a bit more liberal on that particular aspect, because the thing that is a bit more, maybe a bit controversial on the part of Indonesia is that in Java Island or even in the island of Bali, which is a very famous tourist attraction in Indonesia, there are many people who are Hindus still. So in Hinduism, the religion is not often described as monotheistic, but I do know, and this is something that I would have the understanding based on my background, having studied to a certain extent comparative religion. Even in Hinduism, some people like to mention or describe Hinduism as a religion where there are many gods or multiple gods. But in fact, still, the concept of theology or the concept of God in Hinduism still argues eventually to the idea that God is one. But God can appear in different ways and different forms, true or not. Right? So that's why you have the different depictions of God in terms of the different idols that you have in Hindu temples. So maybe if you were to take that particular argument, right, from a more, I would say, uh, a more like interpretation or argument about or an explanation about the Hindu religion. So the principle over here is not something which is contradictory or in any way excluding the Hindu community in Indonesia. But it's a debate that sometimes you hear from time to time about whether or not this particular principle in the Panchasila is arguing specifically for the Islamic religion or bias towards Islamic religion. I think largely in Indonesia today, this has become something which is accepted to mean something general, universal, rather than specific to Islam. Okay, um, maybe at some point, right, if you have time, any one of you sing your national anthem to us. uh, why did I put this? Now, anyone know what is this particular symbol or not? Students from China, you should know. It's what is this? Yeah, this is basically the symbol for communism Or basically, what is this? This is basically a sickle and this is a hammer. So these are basically tools. So this refers to the argument that the country belongs to the people, right? The people, we work together. So that's basically the underlying principle of communism, where everything is shared, right? So there shouldn't be any upper class community or a landlord or bourgeoisie community that controls things. Everything should be shared. So the principle of communism is still in practice in China to a certain extent, but to classify any countries in the world today at this current point in history to be purely communist, I think is very rare, isn't it? North Korea is probably the one that is still purely communist. Cuba also maybe to a certain extent. China, China as a country in terms of the political system, yes, still follows the communist ideology, especially the communist Maoism ideology. But as far as the economic system in China today, it's very much capitalism. Right? Students from China can verify. In China today, everything you have to pay. Even when it comes to sending your children to school, schools are not totally free anymore. You have to pay certain fees. And especially if you want to go from middle school to high school, you have to pay a lot, especially if you want to go to the good schools. Right? So the spirit of communism in terms of everything shared by the people, given by the government, social welfare system, is no longer something that is very dominant in the Chinese political system anymore. It is there still when it comes to basic things, but as far as the economy is concerned, even when it comes to certain public services, also you still have to you have to pay. Right. Yeah. Um, I won't come to that particular argument that much, but then just for us to note, as we were talking previously before about biases that we may have in terms of our way of thinking. Sometimes those of us, like myself also, I grew up during my university days reading books about political philosophy from the West, about the virtues of democracy, the virtues of liberalism, and so on. You tend to have the argument or the way of thinking that is the best way to govern a country is democracy. So you need to have elections, as what we have covered before. But democracy, Western style democracy to be exact, is not necessarily something that can work everywhere, right? So when we were talking previously, for example, about the absolute monarchy system that you have in some of the countries that you are staying now or where you are from, uh, it's nothing wrong with that as long as the people are being taken care of well, right? So if you were to have a king who is ruled based on hereditary leadership. If he is a benevolent, responsible leader, then it's fine. If the people are happy, everyone's taken care of, I think that's okay. Democracy for some countries can would result into chaos because you have people fighting each other, and that is something that you see in some countries in the world today. Now, yeah, this is just basically covering back one by one. Believe in God. Okay, so yeah, religion over here. So yeah, a question that maybe you'll be asking, when you have the national principle says you have to believe in God, does that mean that over here in Malaysia, um, you cannot be an atheist? You be an atheist over here in Malaysia? Now the answer to that is officially you have to belong to a certain religion. But the thing is, if any one of you have seen any of the application forms that we have over here in Malaysia, there will always be a category, an item called on race. So you have normally the boxes, the options would be Malay, Chinese, Indian, and others. Right. So if you're not a Malay or Chinese or Indian, if you're from Sabah and Sarawak, you just tick others. So religion also, you will have normally the options that you have: Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and then others. So officially, if you're an atheist, right, for your own personal reasons, if you don't believe in God, right? Officially, your religion over here in Malaysia would be others, right? So there's no option over there, atheist. So that's how we get around that, in a way, not trying to impose things in a too harsh or aggressive manner, but at the same time also ensuring that everyone at least respect that religion is something which is dominant in the lives of the majority of the people over here in this country. So be respectful, right? So you cannot be, for example, discredit or criticize, right, religions of other people. And it has to be done in a certain courteous manner. So that's why also the last principle is about courtesy and social behavior. Kesetiaan kepada raja or loyalty to king and country. We have talked about this before about the concept of monarchy over here in Malaysia. Um, Perlembagaan is constitution, so supremacy of the constitution. We have covered this also. Some main provisions in the constitution of Malaysia. Right? Rule of law, kedaulatan undang-undang. So once you have the constitution, you enforce the rule of law based on what is stated in the constitution. So respect the law. Decide everything based on the rule of law, based on what you have in the constitution of the country. And finally, kesopanan dan kesusilaan, mutual respect and good social behavior. This is, I think, it's a very nice last principle that wraps up things together or combines or encapsulate everything, all the previous principles together. All of that, right? You follow all those principles, but finally, always remember for us to be respectful to each other. So that is basically something that personally I find the Rukun Negara to be something nice, concise, and precise and beautiful in that sense, because it gives you certain principles in terms of how you conduct your life, how you, in terms of your personal beliefs, and also in terms of how you operate within the law, within the legal system, within the policy, within the structure that you have in the country, constitution and rule of law. But regardless of whether religion and law comes into the discussion, the last important thing to always remember is to have mutual respect and good social behavior. Be respectful, right? We can have all these differences that we have. We can also maybe challenge certain aspect of the law. True, right? Because the law by its nature is something that is contestable, right? You can argue against it. That's why you have the judiciary system. But whatever argument or disagreements that you have in the boundaries of, or even when it comes to disagreements, when it comes to religious issues, always remember to be respectful. Okay,